The Albanese government heads into the summer break with a major win. Not everything made it through, but much of its agenda was passed in the final hours of the parliamentary year. Will it help the government's re-election chances? The Prime Minister joins me this morning. I'm David Spears. Welcome to the final Insiders for 2024. After all the tough talk and hardball tactics, the final day of Parliament for the year saw a surprising amount of cooperation. More than 30 government bills were passed in an almighty hurry, mostly with the help of the Greens. New measures to help home buyers, increase school funding, boost childcare workers' pay, give some relief on HECS debts and restructure the Reserve Bank all became law. The Coalition helped pass a world-first ban on kids using social media, along with tougher immigration powers. It's given the Prime Minister a list of achievements he can point to as he heads into the summer break and a looming decision on when to call the election.
Well, good morning, everyone.
It is crunch time in Canberra.
Parliament is back for the final time this year, maybe the final time before the federal election.
Where would you like me?
And there is lots to get through.
The Albanese government's aged care bill, migration policy,
electoral reform, housing, action on the environment.
Future made in Australia.
And obviously the online social media bill.
Order! I'm hoping for a Christmas miracle.
The federal government has secured the reluctant support of the Greens.
We'll wave through Labor's housing bills.
I'm glad they've finally seen the light.
A war of words has erupted in the Senate.
You bring disgrace to the human race.
The One Nation leader called for an investigation into whether Senator Payman is eligible to sit in Parliament.
It's not racism. If that is not racist, what is it?
The matter is resolved in the affirmative.
And Lydia thought she's been suspended from the Senate. I'd do it all over again.
A day of drama in the nation's capital with a bevy of bills.
The guillotine motion, one which would cut short debate on about 40 pieces of stalled legislation.
It is dangerous to shove bills down our throats.
I just think we all just take a chill pill.
I was not voted in this place to give you a free pass to put through 40 bills.
What Jackie said.
We would like to get these done.
We are willing to work with the government to get real outcomes.
It was a big night. We passed 31 bills yesterday.
This is what progress and delivery looks like.
Order.
We're getting things done. They're just getting angry.
Australian people cannot believe how incompetent and weak your government has been.
We're acting responsibly. They're acting recklessly.
You've done nothing but drive up the prices of everything.
Recklessly mouthing off and recklessness. He has no costings, no detail.
How can Australian families afford another 3 years of Labor?
Australians would be worse off.
Why not call an election now to put Australians out of their misery and allow a competent coalition government to get our country back on track?
Hug it out. It's Christmas.
The Senate do now adjourn.
Yeah. I move that the House do now adjourn and wish everyone a very Merry Christmas.
My guest this morning is Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and stick around for a look back at the defining moments of 2024 and the annual Matt Price moment, which gave us the biggest laugh of the year. First, let's check what's making news. In the 9 newspapers, James Massola reports the Prime Minister will unveil a refreshed Frontbench in late January after Bill Shorten's exit from Parliament. Anthony Albanese is said to be considering 2 options, either splitting the NDIS and government services portfolios between existing ministers, Amanda Rishworth and Mark Butler, or promoting a new face to Cabinet, either Annika Wells or Matt Keogh. News Corp papers carry a Redbridge poll showing more than a third of Australians have delayed medical treatment because of the cost of living crisis. More than a quarter say they've delayed having kids. The survey shows more people agree than disagree with the idea that Peter Dutton is now ready for government. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has visited Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort just days after the President-elect threatened to slap tariffs on Canadian imports. He's the first G7 leader to pay a visit to Mr Trump. We're going to get to our panel, Sam Maiden, David Crowe and Karen Middleton, in a bit after we've heard from the Prime Minister. There's plenty to talk to him about this morning. I'd like to start on one of the more curious moments of the week. The Greens say a deal was done or close to done on new laws to protect the environment and create an Environment Protection Authority. But hours later, the Prime Minister scuppered the agreement after talking to West Australian Premier Roger Cook, who, along with the mining industry, is not a fan of these laws at all.
I had a meeting with the Environment Minister some months ago. On one side of me, I had Rebecca Tompkinson, the CEO of the Chambers of Mineral Energy. On the other side of me, I had Chris Rodwell, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It was a unity Western Australian ticket. We were concerned in relation to some of the elements of the nature positive laws, and we made that position very clear. I'm very pleased to have received assurances from the highest levels of government that those laws will not be going ahead in their current form this week.
Prime Minister, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you.
So are these environment laws gone for good, or does it remain your intention to implement them?
Well, it's our intention to proceed with them, but we'll proceed with them on the basis of our values that we put forward. These laws could have been carried at any time over recent months if the Parliament had the numbers to vote for them.
But clearly Roger Cook and the mining industry have a problem with the laws as they stand. You're saying, you're going there later this week, you're saying you stand by them, you'll implement them either if Parliament comes back or take them to the election?
I'm saying what we want to do is to ensure that there is proper protection of the environment, of sustainability, but also speedier approvals for things that should be approved. We want jobs to be created. We want industry to be supported. And that's why we need to get the balance right. Now, this week, we passed some 45 pieces of legislation. There were a number of things which we didn't. Superannuation for those with balances above $3 million, the electoral law reform, this nature positive laws, veterans affairs. I said at the beginning of the week, I made it really clear, as I have for some period of time, David, that we wanted to get legislation passed, but it would be on the basis of our values. And we held the line on areas like housing, and they changed their mind, the Greens political party, and they went through unamended. We will hold to our values. We won't allow any tail to wag the dog. We want to make sure that happens.
On these environment laws, clearly a deal was either close or, according to the Greens, was done. They reckon you'd agreed to it.
Well, of course they'd say that. No, we hadn't, and they don't say that, David. There is no one in the Greens says that I agreed to it, because it wasn't. We were negotiating across the Parliament with the coalition, all the crossbenchers, a range of measures. Things that we didn't have agreement on were put aside. That was one of them.
OK, there is a draft agreement, though, and a letter to you that says draft agreement on the top and spells out what that...
no, there's not, David.
What that... Well, I've seen the
a draft letter from who?
A draft agreement from Tanya Plibersek to the Greens laying out the amendments.
Well, there's no draft agreement to me, and what we did was make sure...
You're saying that letter doesn't exist?
Well, no letter to me exists. I was negotiating across the Parliament, and that's how you have to do it. Okay. You can't have 45 sets of negotiations.
But a letter from the Minister to the Greens, that you're saying you weren't aware of that?
Well, that wasn't a letter from me. What we did was go through, and where there wasn't agreement, they were set aside, and we progressed 45 different pieces of legislation. We were disappointed that we didn't get legislation through on superannuation.
No, but sticking with this one, just to be clear, you're saying you weren't aware that the Minister had written a draft agreement letter to the Greens laying out...
Well, we were negotiating through a series of legislation. 45 pieces of legislation went through. Not everything did. But what we assured, what we were certain about, was that we wouldn't make major changes. We wanted to stick to our values. We did that successfully. At the beginning of the week, David, no one was saying that we would pass 45 pieces of legislation.
And I'll come to some of those, but I just want to be clear here, because this agreement or draft agreement did lay out where the Minister would have some power to protect native forests from logging. The Greens were of the view that you had agreed to this, but then hours later...
No, they weren't, David. I don't accept that.
And that's what they've told me.
Well, I don't accept that because I was there, and we know things that were put aside. Okay. And in the agreements that were done between myself as the Prime Minister and the minor parties across the board, We agreed on most things, but on some things we didn't.
When you told them there was no deal on this, it was you, Adam Bandt, Sarah Hanson-Young, but not...
And Katie Gallagher.
OK, but not Tanya Plibersek, the minister. Why not?
Because we had 45 pieces of legislation, David. 45 across the economy, vets affairs, social policy, housing policy. That's what has to happen.
So why is Sarah Hanson-Young there? Wasn't it? You're saying it's a general meeting about all sorts of...
Because she's the Senate leader for the Greens, and Katie Gallagher is the manager of government business for the Labor Party.
Shouldn't you have told your minister, Tanya Plibersek, this was not going to happen before you told the Greens?
We did. We did.
You told Tanya Plibersek before telling the Greens that there was no deal?
We're informed. All of our ministers were informed the whole way through about how
what does that
things
mean?
were
Did you speak to her directly?
I spoke to her directly.
And said there's not a deal with the Greens?
That we're not getting an agreement on that. And as I spoke to all of our ministers, this would have taken, David, in hours of discussions, this would have taken up 10 to 15 minutes.
Really?
Total.
Because there is, I've had some of your caucus colleagues express to me a view that Tanya Plibersek was unnecessarily treated badly by not being informed. You're saying she was informed, that they're wrong?
All ministers were informed, David, the whole way through. And when you're negotiating across the whole parliament, look, we began the year with tax cuts for every single Australian taxpayer. We ended the year with a whole lot of cost of living relief and reform, whether it was support for renters, the childcare wages increases, the legislation across 11 different Treasury bills. So we passed legislation dealing with immediate challenges, but also in the rough seas that we've managed to navigate. We've always had our eyes on the horizon, so that long-term agenda as well, future made in Australia, build-to-rent schemes.
Let's talk about some of the things you did get through. Social media, you passed this world-first ban on kids using social media. How will this work, Prime Minister?
Well, we have 12 months, but what we will do is we've outlined in the legislation, one of the things the legislation makes clear as well, that because technology changes really quickly, we've made sure that the legislation doesn't have to be adjusted every time there's a shift in technology. So there are some powers with the minister, but it's clear as well that the obligation will be on social media companies to do everything they can to make sure that those people under 16 don't have access to social media.
Will any of us have to hand over ID to use social media?
We make it very clear. Those processes in detail will be worked through over the next 12 months, but it made clear as well that it's not about providing ID. We know that social media companies have more information about you and I than some of our friends do. And we know that they're able to do that. The obligations will be on them. And importantly, David, we need to take a bit of a step back. What is this about? I've met parents who've had to bury their children as a result of the impact that social media has had, as a result of bullying, and we need to do something about it. Now, this is world-leading legislation, but I assure you the whole world is watching. This was front page of the New York Times yesterday.
Elon Musk is watching as well, and he called it a backdoor way to control access to the internet by all Australians. Are you prepared to talk to him about what you're doing here?
We'll talk to anyone, David, but with regard to Elon Musk, he has an agenda. He's entitled to push that as the owner of X, formerly known as Twitter.
He's also Donald Trump's right-hand man now.
But we'll engage. We'll engage.
So you'll talk to him?
I'll talk to anyone, David. But we are determined to get this done. The Parliament has overwhelmingly passed this legislation, and it's the right thing to do. I want children to have a childhood. I want them to engage with each other. And when mobile phones were banned in schools, there was criticism of that as well. But guess what? Children's education standards are being lifted. They're engaging with each other. They're playing with each other and engaging in a human-to-human level. And that's what we want to happen.
This social media ban was done relatively quickly. On gambling ads, though, you've had this parliamentary report and unanimous recommendations for more than 18 months now, and we still haven't seen any legislation, any response from the government.
Well, that's not right, David.
What is the government's response?
That's not right, David.
What's the government's response?
We've actually implemented a range of measures. We've banned credit cards for gambling. We've changed the statements at the end of ads from something that was pretty benign into something that is very serious.
But on the recommendation to actually
they were all
phase out gambling ads.
Well, that was one element of a whole range of legislation.
So what's your response
and
on
I'm
that?
going through what we have done, including introducing Bet Stop. We've done a range of measures.
But I'm asking what you can do about their recommendation to phase out ads.
We're continuing to consult. This is a complex area. We want to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences. But this week, David, you can hardly say this is a government that has sat back.
But will you do something on this before the election?
And hasn't advanced our agenda. Well, the question of getting something through the Parliament is another one, David. What we saw this week is that we've been confronted by an opposition all year, which has chosen to oppose everything, just about. And this week they actually voted against the doxing laws. They voted against anti-money laundering provisions where people are paying cash from activities unknown to the tune of some of them in the millions of dollars for real estate, for example. And the opposition voted against that.
Are you saying they're turning a blind eye to money laundering by not backing that legislation?
Well, they need to explain why it is that they voted against anti-money laundering legislation in the Parliament, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate this week. And even when it came back on Friday morning, they still voted against it. It's beyond my comprehension why they could do that. But they have had an attitude, David, of just voting against everything. And before this week as well, we had the crossbenchers also being reluctant to pass legislation.
Okay, but the coalition
we had a big breakthrough.
You did.
This week, and it's one which exceeded all expectations, including on this show last week. And so the government has been determined to present our arguments, to make our case, and we've been very successful this week.
Yeah, the coalition did back you on immigration laws. And there are three bills in particular that they've backed here. You'll have the power to deport those members of the NZYQ cohort, the former immigration detainees, some of whom have serious criminal convictions. Where will you now send them?
Well, what we won't do is make those announcements on Insiders on a Sunday morning, David. What this does is give the government power to engage with third countries to make sure that we protect Australia's national interests.
Will you use that new power?
Now, we will see, David. We understand that we got confronted by a decision by the High Court, not of our making and not what we wanted. The government has responded to make sure that our only priority here is making sure that we keep Australians safe.
But you're not going to pass a law and then not use it,
and we will do what we need to do to keep Australians safe, and that has been our priority.
You've also passed a law to ban mobile phones in detention centres, something Labor used to oppose. Why do you need to stop people in detention being able to freely communicate?
Because what we want to make sure is that we look after Australia's national interests in keeping people safe. And we have done that, David. Before the last election, there was some questioning of our resolve. What we've been determined to do is to show our strong commitment to keep Australians safe. We have kept Operation Sovereign Borders fully in place. No one who has arrived here by boat has been allowed to settle here. We've done what's necessary. But at the same time, our big focus, David, has been on cost of living pressures which are there, and we've navigated them. We understand that people...
Well, I want to ask you about cost of living.
We understand that people are doing it tough.
Just on that, and clearly there are measures that you've passed this past week that will help on the cost of living front. But I want to show you this, some OECD data on household disposable income. It goes back to pre-COVID, right? So you can see the rise there. But why has, in Australia, household disposable income continued to go down over the last couple of years?
Well, we understand that people are doing it tough. Global inflation has had an impact. Now, inflation peaked higher and earlier overseas than it did here. But our focus has been on providing cost of living support.
Sorry to interrupt, but take a look at this. You talk about the global factor. Other countries, Canada, the OECD average, the US, They're doing better than Australia with disposable income. Why is that?
Because, David, if you look at the middle of the graph, it tells you the story. Inflation peaked higher and earlier overseas than it did here. Interest rates were higher overseas. Inflation was higher and it was earlier. The impact, because of where we are in the supply chain, occurred later here, and hence why inflation, though, that we inherited with a 6 in front of it when we came to office and rising, now has a 2 in front of it and is falling. Real wages are increasing, particularly in areas like childcare and aged care, where we're provided for special increases. We have a rise as well in business investment. We have more small businesses than we've ever had before in Australia.
When is that going to pick up? When are our living standards going to pick up?
And as well, we have produced tax cuts for every single Australian taxpayer. Now, all of those measures, David, have been opposed by Peter Dutton. People would have been worse off under Peter Dutton if he had his way, because we would have had none of that cost of living relief. And what we're doing now, David, is outlining what a second-term agenda will be, and that Australians will be better off if Labor is able to continue to build on the foundations that we have laid during this first term.
Have you even decided yet when the election will be?
No. I'll decide. I've said very clearly, I know that this is an interest of the media. There was going to be an election in August, September, October, November. I've said the whole way along that 3 years is too short. I think there should be 4-year fixed terms. That hasn't been able to be achieved. Twice that's been tried in referendums and not succeeded. But my starting point is to work from 3 years and to work back from that.
From May?
Yeah, and work back from
You need
that.
a reason to go before then.
Well, we'll make a decision when we make a decision.
Parliament will come back, though, in February.
In partnership. That's certainly our intention.
Yep.
And I've foreshadowed the whole way through, David. I have spoken about 2025 as being the election year.
Right. So we've got a bit of time before.
That clearly is when it is going to be, in spite of the rather bizarre suggestion from Peter Dutton, who has called for an election twice. He called for an election this week to happen in New Year's week, and he called for an election because he was so opposed to our tax cuts for every single Australian taxpayer.
I recall that. Look, I mentioned earlier Justin Trudeau's paid a visit to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. You're not planning any sort of drop-in over the summer?
Well, Justin Trudeau has a specific issue that he's raising with the incoming president, which is the statements about a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods.
So no reason for you to go there?
Well, I'm doing the job that I was elected to do.
Okay.
I've had a very constructive discussion with President Trump, and it was very positive.
And look, just on his cabinet picks, I wanted to ask you about Tulsi Gabbard, who he's picked as Director of Intelligence Services there, Director of National Intelligence. There are concerns, I've been reading amongst Five Eyes partners as well, about her record. She's defended some of Russia's reasons for invading Ukraine, criticised Ukraine's president. Russian state media applauded her appointment. Are you comfortable? Would you trust sharing Australia's secrets with Tulsi Gabbard?
Oh, look, the relationship between Australia and the United States is a strong one. It's never been stronger than it is right now, and as Five Eyes partners, we cooperate through our intelligence agencies, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do so in the future.
Prime Minister, thanks for joining us throughout the year, and we look forward to talking more in the lead up to the election, whenever that happens to be.
Thanks very much, David, and keep your eye on the white car with the flag on the front. At some time between now and May, it will go to Government House, but there won't be an election on New Year's Day or New Year's week on the 3rd of January. I can confirm that.
Good to hear, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
All right, so a bit to unpack in that conversation, particularly around some of the legislation that did and didn't go through Parliament over the last week. And do stay with us for that Matt Price moment coming up a little later, and some of the funnier moments of the year. Let's get to our panel, though, now, and we're joined this week by Samantha Maiden, David Crowe and Karen Middleton. Very good morning to all of you. So it was a big, busy final week of Parliament. Sam, a lot of legislation that went through right at the end. How important was that, listening to the Prime Minister there, how important was that in terms of giving them a confidence boost, giving them this record they can point to?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is a confidence boost for the government. It allows them to talk about the things that they're getting done. I think, the problem with it with the broader electorate is I don't think most of the time voters sit there with a form guide ticking off legislation.
Yeah.
And so most people, if they connected with anything during that week, it probably would have been more of the chaotic nature of the outbursts in relation to the Senate. But there's no getting away from the fact that, they got through a lot of legislation that they'd been waiting a long time.
And a big part of that was the Greens coming to the party, right? And this was obviously through the course of this term, they did play a pretty tough game in demanding all sorts of big changes. But ultimately, as Adam Band pointed out, in the end, they wanted to show they could cooperate.
I understand that pushing the government to act isn't always pretty, but we're about outcomes. We've got as much as we can during this year, and there are tens of thousands of people across the country who will be better off as a result of that. And now we're saying we're turning our attention to the election.
They got nothing out of housing, though.
No, they ended up at the end of the week with an extra $500 million for public housing energy efficiency.
And that was to arrange the guillotine to rush through the 30 bills or so on Thursday.
Where does this leave?
And that was quite separate from the housing.
Some of that was in the works already, I think.
Right. So where does this leave the Greens when we look at the tactics they've employed through this term?
I think they had used the no to the two housing bills, build to rent and help to buy. They had used that as a platform to then argue about other things, a national rent freeze, a big new government agency to build more housing. And so stopping those bills gave them a platform, but I think this week they realised they had dragged it on too long. 2 months ago, they voted with the coalition to reject those bills or to delay those bills even further. Now at the end of the year, both those bills have gone through pretty much unchanged, and they didn't get anything specifically on those bills.
They kind of split the bills apart and focused on help to buy. Claire O'Neill hit a lot of local radios and was hammering the Greens over, look, these are childcare workers, nurses who we're going to help here. And it seems some of that might have been successful as well.
Yeah, and the rhetoric from the Greens changed in the last week or so. All of a sudden they were talking about keeping Peter Dutton out of office. And I think, if you talk to Adam Bant, he'll say, once Donald Trump was elected, we need to emphasise that could happen here. But I think they were stung by feedback to the point about housing, that they were too obstructionist and that the ultimate result could be that they were not facilitating a progressive government, they were facilitating a coalition government.
And they don't want people worried about a minority government after the next election. They want people to vote for the Greens and know that they can work with Labor.
Yeah, and I think Anthony Albanese correctly probably calculated that the Greens were under pressure after some results in the state and territory elections and local council elections.
And would fold at the end.
And he was right.
So let's talk about the nature positive or the environment laws. It was interesting to hear the Prime Minister say there that he did inform Tanya Plibersek.
But when?
About no deal with the Greens.
I mean, I think the timing is really...
Well, I think he said before he told the Greens.
Well, look, certainly the information that I have been given, and I welcome other input from the panel here, is that Tanya Plibersek had a conversation with the Prime Minister on Tuesday night. Now, obviously, Tuesday was a very busy day, a lot of meetings with the Greens and others. He had that ABC event later that night, and I was told that he didn't actually have a direct conversation with Tanya Plibersek until after that. What else happened on Tuesday night? Well, the WA Mines Minister got up at a Christmas party and told 200 miners that this deal was completely scuppered. And depending on who you talk to, some people have suggested that happened before the Prime Minister actually spoke to Tanya Plibersek.
What happened here, Karen?
Well, I mean, my understanding is a bit similar to Sam's. I understood that there wasn't, that Tanya Plibersek certainly thought she had the support of the Prime Minister for the deal that she was offering, and then there was this private meeting with Sarah Hanson-Young and Adam Bant from the Greens. We now heard from the Prime Minister, Katie Gallagher, was there as well, and that was where he delivered the news to them that this was not going ahead.
I mean, his version there is that they had a list of bills that they were going through, tick, cross, that sort of thing.
He doesn't want this to go through before the election. He doesn't want to anger the mining industry in Western Australia. Those seats are very important to him. He doesn't want to invite another deep pockets campaign against the government. And so he was being pretty brutal and saying...
Well, Sarah Hanson-Young, to that point, says Gina Rinehart is the one who's called the shots here.
Gina Rinehart and the logging industry have more say over what happens in this building than the nation's Environment Minister. That says everything.
Does anybody really believe that? I mean, Gina Rinehart is at Mar-a-Lago and Gina Rinehart is inviting Peter Dutton out to WA. I mean, the idea that...
exactly cozying up to the Prime Minister.
The idea that Anthony Albanese is doing something here to keep Gina Rinehart happy, I think that's actually laughable. I mean, I don't think that's actually how it played out. The PM said at the beginning of the week there wouldn't be compromise on the legislative agenda. I think, and the very broad picture is that Labor did not want to give voters the message that they should vote Green in order to get a Greens agenda out of Labor.
But
Labor will go to the election saying vote for a majority Labor government, don't vote for the Greens to push us on policy. And I think at the very big picture, that's what's actually at stake here. However, you know, I think in fairness, Tanya Plibersek had been negotiating for months, got what she regarded as a reasonable deal on a bill that she'd been working on all this term, and it was very close. But the big picture call has got to be made by the Prime Minister on where the government should go strategically.
And I think that is absolutely fine, but I think there is a lack of respect for Tanya Plibersek in this arena. And, you know, picking up what you were saying about letters, and he's saying he doesn't have seen a letter, I'm told there actually was a letter about the deal to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and they even did a draft response. So that would be interesting to see if that letter surfaces. But at the end of the day, of course he can make the call. But what on earth is going on if he's having a meeting with the Greens and even, you know, Katie Gallagher's there and no one bothers to actually tell Tanya Plibersek? The Prime Minister never stops talking about Scott Morrison's secret ministries, but in this instance he's usurped the minister and he hasn't kept her in the loop, and that has the whiff of Scott Morrison about it.
It's a bit different to swearing yourself in
Sure.
to a ministerial portfolio, but proper cabinet government means, you know, the ministers should be told when something like this is happening.
Yeah, and there is disquiet in the caucus about how this has unfolded and where it leaves Tanya Plibersek and how it looks. But I think in the end the Prime Minister prioritised the bills that he wanted to get through, and he made sure the bills he didn't want to get through didn't get through. And there was another one as well that didn't come forward, the extra tax on super contributions above $3 million. Yeah, that's right. He didn't want that. That just sort of disappeared.
The political donations didn't go through either, and I just want to tease out why not, because it looked like the two major parties were going to push this through at the end, changing political donation rules. The independents and minor parties hate this stuff, but what happened there?
Well, there wasn't much compromise on anything, really. There was a Labor compromise on social media with a small amendment that the coalition wanted, but on electoral donations reform, Labor wasn't willing to move to where the coalition were in terms of increasing the caps on donations, maybe basically doubling them from 20,000, which was going to be the new cap. And also the coalition wanted a higher threshold for disclosure to reveal what the donations are. The Labor policy is to set a much lower disclosure threshold, which is 1,000.
I'm told one of the other sticking points, though, is the industry groups and what they can do in terms of their donations and spending.
The coalition's very concerned that this will allow too much money from the unions to get to the Labor Party. So they're very concerned, even though there's also it would affect business groups and the like as well. They were very concerned about that. But what they also tried to do was link the whole bill together as one bill, so that in the event that the High Court tried to strike down bits like the caps under, you know, political communication law, that the whole bill would fall over and bits of it wouldn't be left that the coalition didn't like remaining. So there was some last-minute negotiation around that.
The immigration bills did go through, as mentioned, and look, the coalition aren't being shy about claiming credit for this.
We are basically running the immigration system for the government because they have failed to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah, amongst other things, there's this new power to now deport that NZYQ cohort, pay a third country, presumably Nauru or Papua New Guinea, to take them. I did have a chat for the podcast this week to the former Deputy Secretary of Immigration, Abel Rizvi, about this, and it's that part of these bills that he has a particular problem with.
I do find that quite distasteful. It's essentially saying these people are too dangerous to live in the Australian community, but it's okay for them to live in some other country's community.
Yeah, you can catch that full conversation with the QR codes there, but clearly, and you heard it from Anthony Albanese just before, he wants to show strength on immigration, and that means, you know, doing things like this, passing these laws.
But also that the search and seize powers for people in detention, remember the coalition put that legislation forward through, I think, a couple of times when they were in government, and Labor voted against it. Now the Prime Minister is praising it and saying how important it is to be able to search for drugs and the like. They didn't want to support that when the coalition put it forward.
Simon Birmingham on the final day of Parliament for the year, the leader of the moderates announced in the Liberals announced that he would be gone, he would be going, he won't be sticking around, and I'll explore why in a moment. But he also issued a plea for a bit more moderation, really, in our political debate.
Colleagues, it is not necessary to target one another and personalise debates to advance the issues important to you. It is not necessary to undermine the principles and practices of this Senate to advance the issues important to you.
He was talking in part there about Lydia Thorpe and Pauline Hanson and so on. But look, his departure is fascinating. Sam, why would someone who, if the coalition wins, becomes foreign minister in a matter of months, decide to go?
Well, I think he's been there for a long time. I mean, he is one of the gentlemen of politics. I mean, he's in the Senate where you'd expect gentlemen to reside. But, you know, he's got a young family and he's held a range of tough jobs for a long time, all the stuff that he had to get through with Gonski in schools and the rest of it. And clearly, there's nothing wrong with this, he wants to make some money. So he's got a corporate job lined up and he's probably a bit tired of being the lonesome moderate in the room.
Yeah, look, I was there in the chamber when he gave that farewell speech. His daughters were in the gallery. It was a really touching moment. I don't doubt, you know, they often spend more time with the family, but no doubt after 18 years or so and in the game, a chance to be based in Adelaide is probably a good idea.
Yeah, his family is still together, clearly loves him.
Yeah, that's
He's
right.
got a commercial job that he says is not lobbying and not commentary. And I think is going to be based in Adelaide, so he's actually got a pretty good thing to move on to. And
what does this mean for the Liberals to lose another senior moderate?
It's not clear who's going to be the leader of the moderates in the Liberal Party in the future.
Who is there? Who's
There's
left?
Paul Fletcher, there is Dave Sharma, there's Andrew Bragg.
And there's Bridget Archer, but I mean, she's very much an outlier person, you know, like she's not a leader of the moderates. She's
she's got the calibre to be on the front bench and never seems to be welcomed there.
Does it remove a moderating voice around that shadow cabinet table?
For sure, yeah, diminishes the role of the moderates and their role has been diminished in this term of Parliament and it diminishes it further, I think.
And it's not clear who's going to get foreign affairs as the portfolio. I don't think Susan Lee is putting her hand up for it, even though she's deputy leader, she could.
James
There's a mystery
to the tight people to the death for it. What do you mean?
I mean, Dave Sharma
would be eminently qualified.
Eminently qualified for it.
To the timing, you know, if he waited until after the election, whether they win or don't win, that a reshuffle is more complicated for Peter Dutton. He's going now to allow that to happen
The other
earlier.
one to watch is Julian Leeser, whether he's brought back into the shadow cabinet, because there'll have to be a reshuffle in the coming weeks, and it might be an opportunity to bring him back. Maybe not as shadow foreign
Peter
minister,
Dutton quite likes him. I think.
Yeah,
and he's been,
Well,
he's
been a
very
restoration
good.
of relations. Yeah.
So, you know, where are we now? And I'm a little reluctant to get into election timing speculation because none of us have that crystal ball. But what did you make of the PM's language there and what it all means for whether Parliament will be back? Is there good reason, Karen, for him to bring Parliament back?
Well, they've got most of what they wanted. I think they would like the electoral reform bill to go through before the election. Win, lose or draw, I think they'd rather have that sealed off. So I know there is a school of thought that they would like to come back in February. I think we're always talking about March or May. There's April as well. Easter is quite late this year, so there's a window in early to mid-April you could call an election to have for that period. You'd get clear of the West Australian election date, which is the 8th of March, and that is problematic because if you try and shift that, I don't think it's going to make West Australians happy, and you can't really have it either side or on the same day. So that does make March very complicated.
Yeah,
The argument... Sorry, you go. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to back that up because 8th of March for WA, early April seems like a pretty logical time to go, and then you don't necessarily have to do a budget in late March as it's scheduled. You can do an economic statement and go to the election. But I do think it's interesting that they want to bring, or they expect Parliament to come back because there are a couple of reasons why they could. They might make progress on nature positive, but they've also got tax credits on mining companies where the coalition are against.
Right? So the Future Made in Australia, a bunch of bills went through, but the one that provides the actual production tax credit, the incentive to the miners, they love it in WA, and there's an argument that he could bring back Parliament, spend a week or two hammering the coalition over that.
And I don't think they mind if they don't actually get it through because if the coalition blocks it, they can say the coalition's blocking jobs in Western Australia and Queensland, and they're perfectly happy with running that argument.
I think all of these pieces of legislation are no doubt incredibly important, but they're really small beer when it comes to what will win or lose the election.
Which is?
And the economy. And interest rates. And so the Labor Party, the government, has spent the better part of a year or longer just calibrating everything with this expectation that they would get an interest rate cut in late 2024. They haven't got it. They're now banking on the idea that maybe they won't even get it before the election if it doesn't come until May. And, you know, there's a lot of people in Labor that are concerned that on the trajectory of the primary vote, that if they're now at 51-49 or whatever, that could actually get worse before it gets better.
Just on
and that then raises the prospect of Peter Dutton being able to win the election potentially with a minority government. Now, I know the maths is way harder for Peter Dutton than it is for Anthony Albanese, but there's, I think, a lot of confidence at the moment that Peter Dutton is kind of, you know, into the groove of it all and doing quite well.
Well, he's got his nuclear costings coming in the next couple of weeks, which will be a test for him. But just on, and you heard it from the PM there, this sharpening focus on the alternative, on, you know, really trying to sharpen people's focus on what a Peter Dutton government would mean. I'm told Labor did some polling in the weeks after the US election result, Donald Trump's victory over there, on this question of, you know, do you feel better off than you did 3 years ago, which the coalition have been running that line. And what they asked voters was which was more important. Which party will make you better off in 3 years from now? 70% said, yeah, that's actually the most important. Whether you're better off than you were 3 years ago, only 20%, 10% weren't sure.
I think this is the big question about the way Peter Dutton has played the year, because he's gained ground steadily through the year in all the polls, including the ones that we run in the Herald and the Age. So no doubt about that. And now it's 50-50. There's a margin of error which I like to remind everybody about every time, because there's a lot of leeway either side of that 50-50. But at the same time, he can't rely on the economic complaint to sort of sweep him into power. It's like being a surfer out, you know, waiting for the wave to ride you in. You actually have to do some paddling yourself as well. And on policy, he hasn't done that. And I do wonder, on the economy and on the cost of living, you cannot point to a significant policy that they've got that would fix that for households. So at some point, that's got to emerge.
Hold that thought. This is our final show for the year, of course, and that means it's time for one of our favourites, the Matt Price moment. It's 17 years since we lost Matt. He was a brilliant press gallery journalist and Insiders panellist. Hilarious, insightful, and absolutely loved poking fun at the ridiculous. When he died at just 46, Barry Cassidy launched the Matt Price moment. It's a celebration of the absurd and wacky moments that would have given Matt a chuckle. Here are this year's finalists.
I feel this is very awkward. Every time I see Mr. Longo now, it seems to be at the gym on Saturday mornings. So I apologise for the lycra. But that's all right.
These are yours.
Less worthy men have seen me in far less. So.
This is about cutting red tape, not cutting red corners in relation to moving forward. So I get that wrong. I'll do it once more, sorry. So this is about cutting red... No, sorry. Okay. This is not about cutting red tape. This is about cutting corners. So I got that.
We look forward to our version of the royal wedding sometime in the near future.
This is a really important piece of legislation, and it's going to make sure that we rebuild our. What are you on about?
Wise men say only fools rush in to die. Falling in love with his dangerous alliance.
Oh dear.
I'll find out where they are and let you know. I don't have that detail in front of me.
You don't know the name of the candidate running for your team in the seat that you're in today?
Susan? Yeah, of course, it's Susan. Yeah. I was with her the other night.
Why are you asking the tech companies for more cooperation instead of escalating and using the powers that you already have to compel it?
I think you'll see in this financial year a 100% increase on that zero.
But 100% of zero is zero, so excuse me for being obtuse.
All
right. Well, it's a great pleasure today to welcome Ministers Scriven, Farrell
Every time we say that those opposite need to come clean on these cuts, Cecil should keep an ear out. Cecil should keep an ear out, Mr. Speaker.
All worthy contenders, and Jane Hume nearly went back-to-back for the win this year, but she was pipped by this one.
This is a treasurer who's been in charge of the ACT Treasury, who I'm saying... Are you finished?
I just want you to answer the question.
Are you finished?
I am. Answer the question.
Are you finished or not? I will answer the question in my own way, Ian. You don't get to dictate how I answer the question.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
That was Elizabeth Lee, who was the ACT Liberal leader at this year's election, a memorable insight into how politicians sometimes feel about journalists. And a shout out to the wonderful cameraman Michael Barnett, who kept rolling, kept that frame wide, captured that. After 43 years behind the camera, Michael is retiring. So thank you, Michael. Always a true professional to work with and the best dressed camera operator in the business. Now, our panel will be back with some final observations shortly. Time now, though, for Mike Bowers and the final talking pictures for 2024.
I'm photographer at large Mike Bowers. I've come to the Museum of Australian Democracy here at Old Parliament House, where the annual Behind the Lines cartooning exhibition has opened. And I'm talking to, drumroll please, the political cartoonist of the year, Megan Herbert, and congratulations.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Well, what a week and what a year it's been. The guillotine in the Senate was busier than it's been since the French Revolution as they rammed through 32 pieces of legislation. Matt Golding has picked up beautifully on this Labor's guillotine motion, which is chopping the head off the magnifying glass.
Just a quick glance through and off it goes.
Yeah, I thought Fiona Katauskas picked up beautifully on the end of season wishes from the Prime Minister. You may want all your Christmases at once, Anthony, but passing half-baked laws without proper scrutiny just isn't within my powers.
I love a Christmas cartoon. It's very exciting when you get to see what all the politicians are wishing for.
Has he been a good boy? That's the question.
I'm not sure. We'll see what happens next
year.
I
think he might be on the naughty list. Megan, the Prime Minister tried to get his house in order, but he did manage to get his housing legislation through both houses.
I'm wondering when they're going to introduce the Help to Pay Off Your Mortgage scheme.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Lovely Wilcox cartoon. He's got sold and...
I thought we couldn't afford to buy it.
That was until we couldn't afford not to buy it.
Caught between a rock and a hard place there.
Yes. The bidders seem to be Adam and Max Chandler.
Yes, I think so.
Who, I must say, I think got schooled in how you actually do politics with.
You can only push a certain amount and then you've just got to keep things moving.
Yeah. Mark Knight's done this lovely cartoon, if not a little disturbing. So like a menage at elbow. Did I mention we bought this house with the help from the government's shared equity scheme?
Yeah, I'm wondering if he's actually going to come inside and sit down at the kitchen table and work out the budget, or if he's going to cut and run. It's not clear.
Nordacious has picked up on it's all about the age, really. Happy birthday, Australia, as 10 is old enough to be jailed.
But not old enough for social media.
At 15 and 30.
Old enough to be forced into a digital ID system under the guise of online safety.
Old enough to spread misinformation but still upload selfies as Word documents. All old enough to still be exposed to gambling ads, however.
We should also ban it for anyone who keeps forgetting their Facebook password.
I did love this, a no-arm bandit here that the Prime Minister is playing.
I was going to say, what comes out when you get 3 Dutton heads?
I don't know, a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You've won. Problem gambling, your problem. Megan, it doesn't seem like it's been a great year for climate, and especially not climate protesters, as we saw the protests move from Newcastle Harbour to the front of Parliament House this week.
I think as far as climate protests go, these guys are getting it pitch perfect, because you need to have a protest creating disruption, but not for regular people going about their daily lives.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing a great job. And I've wanted to pick up on that in this cartoon with the beautiful colour, the vibrance of what they're doing.
The police boat here in Newcastle Harbour is saying protesters be warned that we have zero tolerance for any behaviour threatening public safety as the good ship Climate Chaos Accelerant is coming into dock.
Toot toot.
Who's protecting who exactly?
Yeah.
Now, each year at Insiders, we all vote on what we think have been the best cartoons of the year. And lo and behold, this one here, which has got your family sheltering under the good intention words.
Not a funny cartoon.
That it doesn't always have to be funny. The other one that was unanimously voted as one of the cartoons of the year was Glenn Lelever in The Wrong Part of Town, as Anthony Albanese here is down with the guts, courage, spines, backbones and balls.
I'm worried for his safety.
The other one was the Wilcox, which is commenting on Fatima Payman's exit from the party. Labor welcomes diversity for the different perspective it brings.
Perspectives you do well to keep to yourself. Out you go.
Recrossing the Delaware, which was my favourite, from David Rowe. I just love the way David levers off historical imagery.
That's it, yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's a ship of fools here.
Look, congratulations on Political Cartoonist of the Year. You've had a fabulous year, and I'll let you do the honours.
Thanks so much, Mike. Back to you, David.
Thank you, Megan, and congratulations. Thank you, Mike, as well. Let's get some final observations. Karen.
We still have a snapshot of the economy coming before the end of the year in the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook, MyEFO, which will be unveiled in the week starting December 16. I think the shape of that, the forecasts in it, and maybe the extent of largesse in it might give us another clue to when we could see an election earlier or later next year.
All right.
And whether we'll have a budget beforehand.
Yes, he still hasn't decided, he says. David.
I'm going to be indulgently personal and just wish my nephew Tom and my niece Chloe happy 18th and happy 21st. They're gathering today and I can't be there. Lovely kids and good luck to you. But also on the reshuffle, one of the big reforms this year was aged care. Annika Wells was the minister who got that through. If there's going to be a right-wing minister who might replace Bill Shorten and move up, surely she's had a fairly good track record this year to be in the running for that.
And a Queenslander too, Michael. Yeah. Sam.
Well, this time of year, everyone's obviously stuffing their pockets with cash ahead of an election. And, you know, I'm just so impressed that Jim Chalmers and Tony Burke are really doing the rounds of the backbenchers for fundraising events. And I'm sure it's got nothing to do with what might happen one day after an election.
Very obtuse. Thank you. Thank you all very much for joining us on the final show of the year. Look, a big thanks to the Insiders team for another huge year, getting this show to air seamlessly, either here in the studio or wherever we happen to be. A particular shout out to executive producer Sam Clark for steering the ship and bringing out the best in everyone. To Jordan Butler, Josh Martin and Georgia Cranko, thank you for all your editorial strength and ideas. Our editors, creative team, our studio crew, Arthur Hill, our floor manager over here, the one and only Mike Bowers, who along with Fiona Katauskas makes Talking Pictures happen each week and gives us a laugh. And of course, the wonderful panellists who make this show what it is with all your insights and analysis. Thank you. And yes, even the politicians who front up, we do appreciate it. Most of all, thanks to you at home for spending your Sunday mornings with us. Stay safe over the holidays. We'll be back before Parliament resumes. We're going to leave you with a look back at the highs and lows of 2024. Thanks for watching.
Hang on. If everyone speaks at once, no one can hear anything.
You back?
Yeah, I'm jumping up and down about it, mate.
There we go.
I feel like my spiritual home.
Excellent!
Come on, give me a bigger one than that. All right.
Anthony Albanese has abandoned key elements of big tax cuts his government's repeatedly supported.
Let me guess.
Stage 3?
Stage 3 tax cuts, who'd have thought it?
Economic circumstances have changed.
Here's Peter! The coalition officially backed the Albanese government's tax changes.
Not to support the Prime Minister's lie.
He did not say that.
But to support those families who need help now.
Come on, ladies. There's the wig. They're not even wigs, they're natural. Just got to talk to people.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Love is in the lodge.
I asked on the balcony, or one of the balconies.
I'll be there throwing roses out in front of you, Prime Minister.
Don't let us down.
One of the government's signature housing policies faces an early death in the Senate.
It's just immaturity and spite.
The Prime Minister is defending his decision to buy a multi-million-dollar waterfront mansion.
Sorry about this.
Amid the nation's housing crisis.
Bye-bye.
But the reality is we've got a Labor government with a property investor Prime Minister.
Where's the cash? I've always got cash, mate. Hey! I've been telling you.
7 murderers, 37 sexual predators. The details learned about the criminals released into the community following the High Court's immigration ruling 3 months ago.
The government has failed to apply for a single preventative detention order to protect the community.
The Immigration Minister has faced a barrage of questions and criticism over whether he's put community safety at risk.
We are elevating community safety.
Does the Prime Minister still have confidence in the Minister for Immigration?
I have no intentions of making changes imminent. Andrew Giles will be the Minister for Skills and Training.
Prime Minister, then why did you move Andrew Giles from the portfolio?
Because there's a reshuffle.
Nuclear reactors across the country. That's the federal opposition's plan.
It's time for an adult conversation about keeping the lights on and pushing power prices down.
If I wanted to tune into a fantasy, I'd watch Lord of the Rings.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Fertile.
I'm Zombie with World Central Kitchen, and we are here today at the Jordanian Air Military Base.
But 1 Australian and 6 others are dead in Gaza after being struck by an Israeli airstrike.
Zombie Frankham was among 7 killed while delivering food aid.
This is a human tragedy that should never have occurred.
This happens in wartime. Certainly, tragedies do happen in war.
It's not good enough just to say shit happens, that this is war.
A controversial Labor senator who crossed the floor in support of a Palestinian state has today been booted from the party's caucus.
If the same motion on recognising the state of Palestine was to be brought forward tomorrow, I would cross the floor.
She wasn't walking past the Insider studio and Spears didn't yell out, "Hey, Fatima, how about you come and have a chat?"
With a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I announce my resignation from the Australian Labor Party.
Donald Trump has launched a withering attack on Australia's US Ambassador Kevin Rudd.
He won't be there long if that's the case. I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty.
It's really important to chill. Yeah. Just chill.
Former US President Donald Trump has been escorted off the stage at a rally in Pennsylvania after what sounded like gunshots.
I felt very safe because I had God on my side.
Nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
That Donald Trump will become the 47th President of the United States.
Hey, look what happened. Is this crazy?
Well, firstly, Merry Christmas, everyone.
You can't go wrong with this.
We right to go?